Most people, when they think about the Renaissance, they think of Mona Lisa, Michelangelo's David, and Botticelli's Venus. What they don't realize is that the Renaissance has over 300 years of art, and those art can replicate themselves. And people only focus on the popular ones. People don't realize is that Michelangelo's David is actually one of three. You have Michelangelo's, Bernini's, and Donatello's, and they all span over almost 200 years of art and that changing of Renaissance arts. You have the first one, which is Donatello's David, which came in 1469, Michelangelo's David, which came in 1504, and Bernini's David, which came in 1624. And we start off with Donatello's David, which was commissioned by Cosimo de' Medici, who asked for this rendition during the 1450s to be created to have put in front of his house as a shown of his family's wealth. This bronze statue is very different from the other three because, one, it focuses on early Renaissance arts, which you can see by, one, it's bronze. Two, Donatello started the trend of nude figures in Renaissance art. That goes back to the antiquity times of the Greeks and of the Romans. What also makes it different is that it starts off what makes it different is that it's also androgynous compared to the other two. You can see if the paintings the back looks more like a female figure, and it also has a tone of eroticism because you have Goliaths, the guy he killed, helmets, which is leaning very close against his thigh. And when you have this, you can see that Donatello's David is him before, after the battle with Goliath, which is very different from the next two. And he started the trend of male youthfulness in the Renaissance, which composes of human anatomy and this youthful look, which we can see next in Michelangelo's David, which came around in 1504. This David was commissioned by the Council of Florence for Michelangelo, who was only 26 years old at the time, to be created to be put on top of a cathedral for the church. You can see that this is a really good example of high Renaissance arts because he takes in the human anatomy portion of it. He focuses very much on the body and how the stance is. This is a new stance in time called a contrapposto, which is when the body leans all of its weight on the left and his body goes at an angle instead of it being straight up like Donatello's. And you can also see the human anatomy in this because in every portion of the statue is that it has so much detail in the face and the veins and in the thighs. This, when Michelangelo presented this to the cathedral and to the church, they decided that this was too good to be put up high on the church. So they talked around the town and they decided to put the statue in the middle of the city so it can be a demonstration of Florence's power. Because in it you can see that it's David before the battle, not after like Donatello's. And this before stance shows that Florence is able to be ready for any attack that may have come their way, which is very different from Donatello's. And it's also marble, which you can see the start of now marble statues coming into play during the Renaissance. And finally, when we go into the last one, we have Bernini's, which was created in 1624. This is actually more late Renaissance to the Baroque era, which is a different version of art. The Baroque era is a big transition when you go into modern era. It's instead of a stance of a straight figure like David's, like Michelangelo's, and Donatello's, it's more of an action. It's very theatric. You can also see this in the art of the time, which is bright contrast between the darks and the lights, and the very facial expressions that become very big during this time. You can see that in Bernini's, which is a bit different from Donatello's, which was before the battle, Michael's, which is after, and you have Bernini's, which is during mid-battle with Goliath. You can see that because his body is turned and he's holding the sling like he's in mid-shots. That you can see that's the theatrics of the Baroque era. And it's also different from the contrapposto of Michelangelo's stance. This, instead of straight lines, it's diagonal. Everything's turned and straightens. everything's turned at a curved angle, which you can see with his arched back and his bent knees, which becomes into the figure of the Baroque era, which is many of human realistic. Instead of focusing on human anatomy and making it as good as possible, they want to make it more realistic of a human, to have the viewers be able to relate to all the statues. And so when you go over the 200-300 years of statues, you go from Donatello's, which you can tell, which is very early Renaissance, finally of Bernini's, which is late. You can see how much of a transition it goes by.